Lovina's knees pressed hard against the dusty ground. From deep inside her chest, a loud cry escaped, raw, broken and desperate. Her hands trembling over the basin of wet clothes. Her whole body shook as she crawled toward her father. "Papa, please, don't do this to me." Her voice carried across the compound, over the fences, into the ears of neighbors who froze in silence. Chickens scattered, goats raised their heads, even the wind seemed to pause. There she was, only 20, yet her eyes held the pain of 100 lifetimes. Since her mother's death, hunger had been her bedfellow. Her father, once kind, had drowned in palm wine. And then came Mrs. Nathasia, the stepmother who treated her like dirt, making her cook, sweep, farm, and still sleep on an empty stomach. But this moment was worse than all the others. In the small, dusty village of Isoko, people often whispered about Lovina's suffering, but no one dared to speak against Mrs. Nathasia's madness. And now, her father stood before Joshua, the young man from the city who had been working on his farm. For 3 long months, Joshua had cleared bushes, tilled the soil, and planted yams under the burning sun. His hands were blistered, his back ached, but he endured it all because he needed the money. Only, the money never came. Each time Joshua asked for his pay, Mr. Michael gave one excuse after another. But today, Joshua's patience was gone. His voice shook with frustration. "Please, sir, I need my wages. I have worked hard for 3 months." Mr. Michael scratched his head lazily, his breath sour with palm wine. His red eyes scanned the compound until they landed on Lovina, still bent by the basin of clothes. And then, with a scornful laugh, he spoke the words that froze the air. "I can give you my daughter in exchange for the money I owe you. Take her. Sell her body to rich men. That way, you will recover your pay." The basin slipped from Lovina's grip. Soap and water splashed into the dirt. Her whole body shook as she crawled toward her father, clutching at his legs. "Papa, please, I am your daughter. Don't do this to me." But his face was stone, unmoved, his heart drowning in drink. From the corner, Mrs. Nathasia's wicked smile widened. Her voice was sharp, full of venom. "Good for her. One less mouth to feed." Lovina screamed louder, rolling in the dust, pounding the ground with her fists. Her cries tore through the compound, but the neighbors, though they pitied her, only whispered from behind their fences. None dared to step forward. And Joshua? He stood frozen. His fists clenched, his chest heaving. He had come for his wages, but now he was staring at something far worse, a young woman's life being sold before his eyes. With tears rolling down her cheeks, Lovina bent down and packed her few clothes into a small nylon bag. Her neighbors stood around, shaking their heads, some wiping their eyes. "Take care, Lovina," one old woman whispered. Another neighbor waved slowly, her voice breaking. "God be with you, child." Lovina's heart felt heavy as she followed Joshua out of the only place she had ever known. Her legs were weak, but she kept walking. The bus that would take them to Lagos waited by the roadside. It looked big and noisy, and Lovina had never been on such a journey before. When she stepped inside, her heart pounded hard. The bus rumbled and shook as it moved. Lovina pressed her face against the window, watching the tall trees and dusty roads disappear behind her. Fear gripped her chest. She didn't know what awaited her in the city. She didn't know if she was going to be safe or if her life would only grow worse. She cried quietly, whispering prayers under her breath. "God, please help me. Please don't leave me." Joshua sat beside her, his face serious. He didn't say much during the long journey. He only stared out of the window, his hands clasped tightly. Hours later, the bus rolled into Lagos. Lovina's eyes widened. Cars zoomed past, tall buildings stood high, and loud voices filled the air. She had never seen so many people in her life. Everything looked new, strange, and frightening. Joshua led her through the busy streets until they stopped in front of a very large and beautiful house. Lovina gasped. It was the biggest house she had ever seen. The walls were painted bright, the windows sparkled, and flowers decorated the compound. Joshua smiled faintly. "This is where I work. I just got a job as the gateman." He walked her to a small house at the back, the boys' quarters. When he opened the door, Lovina's eyes grew wide. The room was bigger than the one she had shared with her father back in the village. In the middle stood a big mattress, soft and inviting. For the first time in many years, Lovina smiled, just a small, faint smile, but it was real. 2 days later, sunlight streamed through the small window. Lovina stretched her arms gently, blinking in surprise. For the first time in years, she had woken up without hearing her stepmother's shouts. No beatings. No harsh commands. No fear. Instead, a sweet smell floated into the room. Her nose twitched. Something was cooking. She stepped quietly into the kitchen and froze. There was Joshua, stirring a pot, his face lit with a rare smile. "Good morning," he said, glancing at her. Lovina giggled shyly. They sat together and shared the food, laughing softly between bites. Each spoonful warmed her stomach, filling spaces that had only known hunger for so long. Then Joshua looked at her seriously. "After we eat, I want you to meet someone." Lovina tilted her head. "Who?" He only smiled mysteriously. "You'll see." Her heart raced with curiosity. She went to her small bag and pulled out her best dress. It was a simple gown she had bought with the little money she once made fetching water for people in the village. She brushed her hair with her fingers, took a deep breath, and followed Joshua out. They walked from the boys' quarters toward the main building. Lovina's steps were shaky. She clutched her hands together as the large, beautiful door opened. An elegant woman in her late 50s appeared, her presence calm and graceful. She wore a neat dress and a warm smile. Her name was Mrs. Coker. Joshua bowed slightly. "Good morning, Ma." "Good morning, Joshua," the woman replied gently. Then her eyes fell on Lovina, and she gasped softly. "And who is this beautiful young lady?" Joshua's lips curved into a proud smile. "She is my wife, Ma. The woman I told you about on the phone." Lovina's cheeks flushed. She lowered her eyes, too shy to speak. Mrs. Coker's smile deepened as she stepped closer. "Welcome, my dear." They sat with her for a long while, talking about life, about the city, about hopes yet to come. And when Lovina finally walked back to the boys' quarters, her heart beat with a strange new feeling of hope. Lovina sat gently on the edge of the bed. Her fingers played nervously with the edge of her wrapper. She turned to Joshua and whispered, "Can I talk to you?" Joshua nodded at once. "Of course, Lovina. You can tell me anything." Lovina's voice shook as she spoke. "When my father told me to follow you to the city, I thought my life was finished. I thought you would sell me to men. I felt useless. I felt unwanted." Her lips trembled, and her eyes filled with tears. "But you didn't. You gave me peace. You even cook for me. God bless you, Joshua." Joshua's heart softened. His eyes shone with kindness as he looked at her. "Lovina," he said slowly, "from the very first day I saw you on your father's farm, I loved you. But I was afraid to tell you. I am poor, and I didn't think a girl like you would ever look at me." Lovina let out a soft laugh, then quickly covered her face as a tear slipped down her cheek. One hot afternoon, Lovina was helping Mrs. Coker carry some groceries from the car into the kitchen. As they set the bags down, Mrs. Coker turned and smiled warmly. "Lovina, Joshua told me you are a good cook," she said. "My cook has traveled to the village. I want to offer you her job." Lovina's eyes grew wide. She gasped softly, then covered her mouth. "Me? Cook for you?" Mrs. Coker nodded. "Yes, my dear." Tears of joy rolled down Lovina's cheeks. She fell to her knees and held Mrs. Coker's hand. "Thank you, Ma. This job will help me save money and maybe one day go back to school. I promise, I will make you the best meals you've ever tasted." 2 days after Lovina began working for Mrs. Coker, something unexpected happened. She was in the kitchen. She had just finished slicing fresh water leaf. She was about to use it to cook afang soup, the smell of spices already filling the air. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Lovina turned quickly and froze. A tall, handsome young man stood in the doorway. His eyes were sharp, his smile slow. It was Nelson, Mrs. Coker's only son. He stared at her for a long moment before speaking. His voice was smooth, almost like a song. "Damn, you are so beautiful," he whispered as he walked slowly into the kitchen. "You look like the morning star, as if God created you on a Sunday morning." Lovina's heart skipped. She gripped the knife tighter and lowered her gaze, pretending to focus on the vegetables. Her hands shook slightly, but she kept working. She didn't reply. Nelson chuckled softly, stepping closer, but she refused to meet his eyes. Later that evening, Lovina walked back to the boys' quarters, her mind heavy. Joshua greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome, Lovina. How was work today?" But she didn't smile back. Her face was pale, her shoulders tense. Joshua frowned. "Why are you sad?" Lovina's voice was low. "Your boss's son. Nelson. He came into the kitchen today. He was flirting with me." Joshua's brows drew together. For a moment, his jaw tightened. Then, just as quickly, he forced a small smile. "Don't mind him. That's just how he jokes. He's harmless." But Lovina shook her head slowly. "I didn't feel safe." Joshua stepped closer, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "Don't worry," he whispered. Then, for the first time since they met, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. Lovina froze. A strange warmth spread through her chest. For a moment, the fear of Nelson faded, replaced by something new, something she didn't yet have words for. 1 week later, Lovina was in the kitchen, carefully chopping vegetables for lunch. The sunlight fell through the window, making the room warm and bright. She hummed softly to herself, lost in the rhythm of her work. Suddenly, she noticed movement from the corner of her eye. Nelson was there, leaning against the wall, watching her. Lovina's heart beat faster. She knew he had been staring at her before, but now he was closer. "You are beautiful, smart, and hardworking," Nelson said, stepping slowly toward her. His voice was smooth, almost like honey. "Be my girlfriend. I will change your life. I will send you to the university. Don't waste your time with that poor security man." Lovina's hands trembled slightly, but she held her head high. "Thank you, sir," she said firmly. "But I am not interested. I am happy with Joshua, and I know one day God will lift him up." Nelson frowned but didn't give up. He smiled in a way that made Lovina feel uneasy, then turned and walked away. That morning, as Lovina went to meet Mrs. Coker, Nelson's words kept ringing in her head. She couldn't shake them off. Mrs. Coker noticed the troubled look on her face and asked gently, "Lovina, what is wrong, my dear?" Lovina's eyes filled with tears. She could not hold it in anymore. She told Mrs. Coker everything, how Nelson had flirted with her, how he had asked her to leave Joshua, and all the things he had said about her husband being poor. Mrs. Coker's mouth opened in surprise. She sat quietly for a moment, thinking. Then she said slowly, "Lovina, maybe my son likes you. Maybe you should give him a chance." Lovina froze. Her heart skipped a beat. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Joshua gave me a life when my father threw me away like a piece of yam. He may not be rich, but I love him. I will never betray him." Her hands shook as she wiped her tears. Without another word, she turned and left the room, her feet moving quickly toward the boys' quarters. She couldn't believe what she had just heard from Mrs. Coker. When she opened the door to her room, her eyes widened. There were bundles of money spread neatly on the bed. She gasped for air and shouted, "Joshua, what is going on?" Joshua stepped forward, a gentle smile on his face. "Lovina, I have been saving this money ever since I came to the city. I wanted to start my own business. But, after I overheard your conversation with Mrs. Coker, and how you defended me. I want you to use this money to go back to school." Lovina looked at the money, then back at Joshua. Her heart was full, but she shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "Let's take this money, leave this house, and find a small apartment. We can use the rest to get a little shop and start our own restaurant." Joshua's eyes widened in surprise, then he nodded. "If that's what you want, we will do it. Together." Lovina smiled softly, a new hope filling her heart. But deep down, she could not stop thinking about Nelson, about Mrs. Coker's words, and about what the future in the city would bring. That night, Joshua held Lovina close. His arms were warm, and she felt safe for the first time in years. Slowly, he kissed her gently. Their hearts beat together as they made sweet love that night. It was a night full of love, trust, and comfort. The next morning, Lovina woke up early. She cleaned the house, tidying every corner, dusting, sweeping, and arranging things neatly. She sat down to rest, her body tired but her heart happy. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Lovina froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door to see Mrs. Coker and Nelson standing there. Their faces were calm, almost shy. "We came to say sorry, Lovina," Mrs. Coker said softly, "for the hard words we said yesterday." Nelson nodded and added, "Joshua is lucky to have you as a wife. You are a good wife material." Lovina's heart beat fast. She felt uneasy. She had made up her mind she wanted to leave the house. She didn't feel safe with Nelson around. She feared he might try to hurt her someday. One bright morning, Joshua gently woke Lovina. "I have something to tell you," he said softly. "Please forgive me for not saying it sooner." Lovina looked at him, curious and worried. "Nelson is not just Mrs. Coker's son," Joshua said, his voice serious. "He is my younger brother. And I am not just a security man. I am a billionaire. I am the first son of Mrs. Coker. I have been hurt many times by women, so I wanted something real, someone who could love me for who I am." Lovina's eyes widened. Tears filled her eyes. She ran into Joshua's arms, and they hugged tightly. It was a long, beautiful hug full of relief, love, and hope. Soon, they had a big, beautiful wedding in Lagos. The whole city seemed to celebrate with them. News of their marriage reached Lovina's father. He was now very poor and sick. Her stepsister saw the wedding pictures on social media. She ran to tell her father. Lovina, however, had moved on. Her past was behind her. She had a new life full of love and happiness. Years later, Lovina graduated from the University of Cambridge. She studied medicine and surgery. She wore her graduation gown with pride, her heart full of joy. Joshua shouted the loudest, running to hug her. Lovina laughed and cried at the same time. Tears of joy rolled down her cheeks as they held each other. Finally, after years of struggle, pain, and sacrifice, Lovina had a life she had only dreamed of, a life full of love, respect, and happiness. Lovina's journey showed that even when life seems unfair, destiny has its own way of rewarding patience, courage, and faith. Remember, no matter how hard life gets, trust your journey, your destiny is waiting for you. If you enjoyed Lovina's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing stories that will warm your heart and inspire you.